Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Lunch and Learn for March 2026. I'm John Zimkus, the Education Director and Historian here. Upcoming Lunch and Learns you might be interested in. On April 23rd, we'll have Aviation Myths, Heroes, and Oddballs. Jim Newport will be our speaker. He is our facility manager, which is another name for handyman. And he's also quite a pilot, as I understand it. And so he is very excited about giving the talk in April. On May 21st, we have Lieutenant Colonel Judy Pearson, retired from the U.S. Air Force, and she'll be talking about the Military Women's Memorial in Arlington Cemetery. Very appropriate just a week or so before Memorial Day. On June 18th, I will be your speaker, and we'll be following the tracks of the Underground Railroad in Warren County. We'll talk about the legends, the myths, and the facts that we know about the Underground Railroad, and how much of what we think we know is actually circumstantial evidence. So in order to be successful, it had to be a secret, and a lot of those secrets are still being kept. So those are the kind of things we have coming along. Our speaker today is James Ott. James is a resident of Crescent Springs, Kentucky. He is a freelance writer. Previously, he has been a contract writer for McGraw-Hill, working with Aviation Week and Business Week. He has also been a senior editor of Aviation Week. He was a reporter and Kentucky editor for the Cincinnati Enquirer for a number of years. Aerospace Journalist of the Year in 2002 by the Royal Aeronautical Society. He is educated at Thomas More University and Xavier. His two great passions are, as you can tell, aviation, but also Frank Duveneck. Duveneck, perhaps the best known, if not the best artist to come out of the tri-state area, not only as an artist, but as a teacher of art, not only in the Cincinnati area, but also in Europe. James has written the book, The Greatest Brush, Love, Tragedy, and Redemption of Artist Frank Duveneck. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce James Ott.
Thank you very much, Don. It's my only second visit to Lebanon, but I've enjoyed it so much. The first was at the Lamb and had a wonderful lunch there. And today I visited the paintings upstairs and I was quite impressed. Very, very nice. I'm hoping to talk about Frank Duveneck in three parts. I was going to be an introduction about his career, and then follow up with some pictures of his paintings and various people that he knew over the years. And then thirdly, just a kind of a recap of why I think he's very important. Duveneck was born in October of 1848 in Covington, Kentucky, somewhere between 3rd and 4th Street on Scott in Covington. He was born to his family moved fairly quickly to another part of Covington called Allentown. A lot of the German immigrants moved there. In fact, at 12th and Greenup Street, there's a building there, and they don't call it Greenup, they call it Grunop, G-R-U-N-O-P-P. And he was a talent actually from the beginning. Their house is not that far from the Licking River. And I don't know if you know, the banks there are all very muddy, and it's, of course, it drains into the Ohio. And he used to form little figures for his friends and made toys out of them. I don't know if he baked them or not, but in any case, they said that was a great thing. And the other part of it was he painted signs for his father's brewery, and also a German beer garden that they had on on Greenup Street. He lucked out, really, during the Civil War. Kind of an interesting story about him. He was a camp rat for Union soldiers who were encamped around 12th Street in Covington. And about that same time, he got a job as another kind of a camp rat with a bunch of artists in a company called the Covington Altar Stock Building Company. And it was that company was owned by the Order of St. Benedict, the nuns and priests of that order. And they were all artists, and what they were doing is preparing instruments and various kinds of devices that are used at Mass in churches all over the Midwest, New England, and even up to Canada. So he learned from a lot of German artists who were, actually from Germany and were part of that Benedictine company. He toured all over the Midwest and also New York, and I guess up to Quebec City, where there's a church there right across from Quebec City, actually across the river, that was done. He was so good as a painter that all of his artist friends, principally Schmidt and Lamprecht, if those names already mean anything. Schmidt was one of the great painters of Mother of God Church in Covington, Kentucky. It's a beautiful building there. They managed to get him a slot at the art school Royal Art School in Munich, Germany. And his father paid, I think it was $150 a year for a 2 years tuition. And he went to Munich in 1879. He was around 20 years old. And he was such a stupendous success there that the art school gave him his own studio. And that's while he was a student there. Some of his great work was, in fact, he followed what they called at that time realism in German painting. Realismus, I think it is in German. And he was so successful at that. And a lot of the paintings that you see are in that dark, rather backgrounds. And it's sort of like Frans Hals, Rembrandt, those kinds of paintings. And he was so good at it that he, that, as I say, he got the studio. What else to say about Frank? He in fact founded his own art school at Munich, and he met his wife-to-be at that time, Elizabeth Boot, who was a textile heiress from the Boston area. Their family owned the Boot Mills, which is in Lowell, Massachusetts, and it's it's part of the National Park Service there. She was an heiress as well. She became one of his students, and he married her in 1886, and they had one child, Frank Jr., and then suddenly she died, and while they were in Paris, she died of pneumonia. And Frank was lost for 2 days in Paris. Some of his students actually had to found him in some bar somewhere, and he never really got over it. It short-circuited his career for years. All through the 90s, you don't see much work from Frank Duveneck except the image that he created of her, and which is in the Cincinnati Art Museum. It's also in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. It's also at the Met in New York, and of course the sculpture is also on top of her grave in a Lori cemetery in Florence, Italy. After that, Frank did some work. He did recover to some degree, but he became a teacher in Cincinnati it was around 1900. He taught for 20 years until his death of throat cancer in January of 1919. again, he was, I think well, I don't want to go to that part of it, but we do have a piece of news. The city of Covington, his home is in the 1200 block of Greenup Street in Covington. It's a 2-story frame building. Here it is here. They have allocated about $150,000, I think, something like that, for a company in Cincinnati to restore that building. It's been in decrepit condition, big holes in it, and there were animals running through it and this kind of thing. So at least this might be the start of maybe a complete renovation of that building. Okay, let's see some pictures here. If that might be the next. This is the second part here. Is this how you do it, Frank?
Yeah, touch it.
Oh, touch it. Oh, okay. Oh, there it is. There's Frank, and that was a picture taken in Cincinnati. If you can all see that, just after he returned from Europe. They called him the Viking because he had this blonde hair, and. But he looks like a real character to me. See if this is right. Oh yeah, oh, whoops, wrong way. This is Robert Selden Duncanson. He did the painting in the Taft Museum, if you've seen those murals. He did this of Covington and Cincinnati on the other side. And you can see Covington was just a very small, this was done in about 1850. So Frank was in there somewhere. The Benedictines built that church, St. Joseph, and that's the first convent that the Benedictines had. And this became their later it's now Villa Madonna Academy. It's on the river in Villa Hills, but that was the first academy that they had in Covington. It later was a part of Villa Madonna College, which is now Thomas More. Oh, there we are. Here's another shot of Frank. I think he was looking for publicity, I think. You can see 1877. This was his, here he is here. And that's one of his teachers. Who was that, Libel or, I'm not sure. Yeah, but you can see the group of students from all over the world, actually. He returned to Cincinnati around 1874, and this is Henry Farney, the Indian painter. They were good friends. And the Germania Society, I think, commissioned that painting of Joan of Arc. And Duveneck was working on that painting. This is another painter. I think his name was Dengler. Unfortunately, he did not live very long after this. This is one of his first paintings. I always liked it. There's kind of an early American feel to it. The brushwork is there, and the hands. He was the greatest at hands and eyes. In fact, one of his professors, Lamprecht, required him to paint an eye every morning when they were together as when he was a teenager. His wife, Elizabeth Boot, bought that, bought that painting in an exhibit at a show, really, in 1875 in Boston. And at that very same exhibit, Henry James, the author, was then a critic for the Galaxy magazine, and he thought Duveneck was kind of hot stuff. You can see his hands. They're just, I don't know, there's something great about the way he does that. This is a landscape in Pauling, Bavaria. His school in Munich, he had summers he would spend in Pauling, which was right nearby, really. And there's something about the brushwork of Duveneck that they say it has a third dimension to it. That's why I happened to mention it to the ladies here earlier, that the painting upstairs has that dimensional quality. I just love it. Yeah, this is Lefitz. I'm not sure of the paint of this. That's one of his professors. But again, it looks like Rembrandt to me and Franz Hals. This is the famous painting, the Whistling Boy. It's in Cincinnati Art Museum. He did many of them like this, and a lot of people know when you're going down to see the Reds, see the Cobbler's Apprentice, which is very similar. Here's Frank in England. He learned to sketch, and to etch, excuse me. And he had one of his students had a printing press, and he and Whistler, the painter, worked together. And he was invited to England by Lady Campbell, and he visited at that time. This is Lady Campbell, Gertrude Elizabeth Blood. She was an Anglo-Irish woman who was engaged. This is kind of a side story, but it's interesting nonetheless. Baldoni did this job on her, and she was in a visit to Colin Campbell's home in Scotland over a weekend. On Monday morning, she was engaged to him. And he was a real character, I'm afraid. They never did really get along. They had the longest, I think it was a 2-year-long divorce case in London, and she lost the case. This is another painting of her by a man named Percy. She's very pretty, of course. She became a journalist. You know, if you have nothing else to do in your life, you become a journalist. Frank Duveneck did this sketch of her, and see the difference in the paintings? One is sort of glam. Here she is, just like a simple, ordinary woman, and that's just the sketch. In the painting, it looks a lot like it. But he thought of something different about her, I think. This is his wife. He painted that in 1888, just before she died. That's her wedding dress that they wore a year or two before. And she, as again, had died of pneumonia, and it just killed him. I love this. It's very pretty, you know. She knew everyone in Florence, Italy. That's what her home, actually. That's the Boot Mills in Lowell, Massachusetts. That's another picture of it. Charles Dickens visited there and said that he thought they treated the people a lot better than they did in England. That's Mrs. Duveneck when she was a child, and that's her father, who was an expatriate himself, graduate of Harvard. He was a musician. Some of his work was played at the Vatican. Yeah, this is Trollope, you know, the writer. That's his brother, and she did that sketch of him and when she was a young lady. She did that of herself. I don't know why that's not working, but Henry James. He and Mrs. Duveneck exchanged about 80 letters, all of which are today, you can still read them today. I think there might have been an attempt to, I mean, for him, actually, I shouldn't say this, I'm not really clear on it, but he was her great friend. I don't know if it was any love there or not, but he didn't like Duveneck, which I think is an answer. This is one of the etchings that he did in Venice. And that one, I think, was sold by Mary Rand of the Hyde Park Gallery not too long ago. Another picture of Elizabeth. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, now try.
Yeah, okay. There we are. That's the father. And he actually was against the marriage. He liked Duveneck, but he was against the marriage and actually had a prenuptial agreement that Frank had to sign. And there was a copy of it in Paris, and there was a copy in the Kenton County Court. I happened to see it. And it demanded that Frank not touch her money. This is after their marriage, they lived in Florence, Italy. And there's Mrs. Duveneck, their dad, and there's Frank, sort of a cocky look to him there. That was the villa where they stayed. That's Frank Jr. Happened to meet him, actually. In the 70s, he and the family visited Covington and donated a lot of paintings, well, most of which were in the public library there in Covington. He was an electrical engineer, taught at Stanford, and he and his wife was one of the Whitneys. I mean, all this money was being directed in one place. There's right. Yeah, this is the painting that Frank did. It's in the art museum, and this is the marble version of the of this death thing in Boston. That's another picture there. An art historian said that he thought that he was inspired by this picture here of what is the name, Ilaria de Corretto, which was a very big item during the Renaissance, and it's in the church at Lucca, I think, in Italy now. Dog at the feet, Fidelity. She's expecting. You can see the stomach there. She died at a very young age, and that's one of Frank's pieces that it's in the art museum. That's Folly Cove. I don't know why I threw this in there, but it's in Gloucester, and he painted it as well. I just thought it was kind of a friend of mine used to live and swim in that. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, there's Molly Duveneck. I did tell the ladies here the long story. It's chapter 9 in my book. But Molly was his half-sister. Oh, during that prenuptial agreement, I forgot to mention it, he discovered that his name was not Duveneck, but Decker. His father died in that cholera epidemic in 1849, and his mother was 21 years old. And he was 1 year old himself. Saw that in the 1850 census. And then she married Squire Duveneck. And Molly was his half-sister, was the youngest of all of them. There were about 8 or 9 in the family. There's Frank painting in Gloucester. He painted there off and on from 1900 on to about 1919. There he is, the Teddy Roosevelt look, yeah. And 1905, he was commissioned to do the murals in the new cathedral in Covington, 12th in Madison. And so he went to Italy. That's a kind of a basement area, I think, really, in Siena. This is is that the one from... this is a study that he did. See this woman down here? She looks just like her mother, well, his mother, I mean. Imploring. Frank left the church when he was in Europe, and he didn't return until his deathbed. This is another test. These are from the art museum. They have about 290 paintings, I think, there. He bought a lot of them in 1915 wanted to have them centered in one place. I thought that was kind of interesting, this little thing down here. That is the Blessed Sacrament Chapel in the cathedral. And this is, of course, you can see the murals. City used to roll them up. And it took him, I think got the commission somewhere around 1905, and they weren't installed until 1910. So he used to take them to the art museum, roll them up, and then paint there for a while and then bring them back. This is his mother, Catherine Seamers Duveneck, who's a real pioneer. Her family moved to Lima, Ohio from Cincinnati, where they were first. And mother and father both died. She was 11 years old. Her sister was 12. They walked from Lima into Covington in 1842. And she got a job as a housemaid. And here's painting with some of his students from Covington. The reason I got interested, I think, in the beginning is we have a student, Francois Jourdan. We have one of his paintings. It was my father bought it years ago, and it's always was an interest to me. Jourdan founded the art museum at Richmond, Indiana. He also moved to California. This is a Gloucester painting. I think it shows another style coming forward. Certainly more modern. There's another picture of him. Yeah, one of the things I tried to do in the book actually was to I'm not an art historian, I just like it, but I wanted to get into his character, and I think he was a kindly man, very quiet, and he seemed to be extremely sensitive. That's why I think that when he lost his wife, it almost ruined him. That's in that the Duveneck house in Covington. In 1915, he was at the Panama Pacific exhibition, the one in San Francisco. It was kind of they were rebuilding after the earthquake there. And Frank was a big hit there, Duveneck dinner. All of the artists from around the world, I think there must have been 40 or 25, somewhere in that area, commissioned a gold medal in his honor, saying that he was the success. Oh, here's Molly. I think that's the Meekins. He was a painter. And then Frank, that's in front of that. You probably remember that from San Francisco. That's the only thing left. For some reason or other, I have another painting of him. And one thing I like to say is this is his Italian style. When he was in Florence, and he'd go to Venice and so on. It's warm and so different, Oh, again, around, same thing again. Yeah. This is a woman. That woman, I think, was a neighbor of his. Wilson was her name. He's buried in Mother of God Cemetery in Covington. It's on Madison Pike, Fort Wright, and all of the Duvenecks and the Deckers are buried there. In fact, oddly enough, one of my friends is Frank Decker III, and he said that's Frank Duveneck is his great uncle. He's 94, and he lectures every day at Mass. Quite a fellow. 1917, Frank got the University of Cincinnati gave him this LLD, and Wilbur Wright got it for the science, and he got it for art. So there we are. So a third part is, and it's going to be kind of brief, I think he was a great artist because, if anything, for his versatility. The portraits, the landscaping, the etchings, the sculpture. And in fact, he got several commissions afterwards, and if you go to Harvard, Eliot, one of the former and well-known presidents there, is you can see his sculpture, and it's still there. He was lucky in the sense that he was painting at a time of real patronage. Industrial Revolution had created a lot of wealth. People were interested in the art. Cincinnati Art Museum started in 1880? And he also kind of gained from the publicity. He had befriended the Pinnells, who were artists at the time. The wife was a writer. She was doing quite a bit of writing for magazines. So he became well known in America because, although he was in Europe, became well known in America because of these articles. Excuse me. William Dean Howells, the writer, fictionalized Duveneck and his boys, as he called them, his students, in a book called The Indian Summer, which was published around 1888. So these are the kind of things that were happening to him. He's also a painter from Cincinnati. He's a painter in Boston. He's a painter in Bavaria. He's considered a painter there, and also in Florence. And I think the greatest thing that happened in recent times, in our State Department funded an exhibit and a book about the painters of American painters in Florence. And Duveneck was all over it. I mean, he and his wife both. So I think that, he's still with us in many ways. I've always been interested because of his story, as well as his art. But the great hope is that, that he will continue. People will still regard him as a great painter. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, yeah.
So I was going to ask you if anyone knows what a commemorative medal is.
Oh, the medal? Oh, that's a good question. I don't know that it's at the Art Museum. I imagine the family owns that. They have 2,500 acres in the Los Altos Hills, just south of San Francisco. The family, a lot of the family were raised there, the Duvenecks. I talked with in fact, I'll ask the great-grandchildren. I'm close to them. And, but I don't know, I bet it's there. Yeah. They've donated that property to an organization that takes care of, children who are particularly undeprived, and they spend times there. It's a beautiful spot, really.
The son, he came back in Cincinnati and was taken care of by...
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I missed that part. After the wife died, he was so devastated, and so Frank Jr. was raised by the Lyman relatives in Boston, and he's a graduate of Harvard as well. But Frank wasn't in any condition to take care of him, I think, and so I mean the Lymans took over.
Any other artists in the family?
Yeah, the granddaughter who I visited in California, who's now deceased. When I talked to her, she was mid-90s. She was a potter, and very good one too. The others are the ones that I know of, and I'm on Facebook with them. They're not. I think the one grandson was a landscape artist, that sort of thing. There's a school named after Frank Jr. and his wife, who was one of the Whitneys, and it's named for them because of all the work that they did for people there. Elementary school.
Is much of his work left in southern Germany?
You know, he's a friend of mine, Fred Yeiser. I don't know if you remember Fred. He was a book editor at the Enquirer, Princeton grad, and he said that he's regarded as a minor Bavarian painter. So, you know, better than none, I guess. Huh?
Well,
Yeah.
yes.
Where did you mention is the largest collection of his work?
It's in the Cincinnati Art Museum, all in that they have a preserved area, and they have about 250, somewhere like that, paintings. They're just extraordinary. They allowed me to see them, and I went with artist friends of mine, Carl Sampson and Lufwich, I think his name is, yeah, and we went to see them, and I took photographs and things of that sort. But Frank Duveneck bought many of them. After he got that gold medal, he realized time was ending for him, and he bought a lot of the paintings that had been sold, you know, earlier. So, yes.
Is your book available for sale?
Yeah, it is. I've got a couple of them here. So, yeah. In fact, it's that's a story in itself. A man who was the publisher of the company, who's now deceased, unfortunately, and it was around since about 1910, but he was an art lover. Alberto Casso is his name. He died in the last year, but and they printed the book in 2016. It's kind of a niche book. I'd sold about 3,000 copies, but I do have some. I can sell it for a discount too. You can also get it at Amazon or at Roebling Books in Covington.
Well, thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
James.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Folks, please remember that there is free admission to the museum. If you you turn to the right as you get down the ramp, you're into the transportation area. Take the elevator up to M, mezzanine, and you'll see many of the paintings we have of the same period of Frank Duveneck. And also you will see a sculptor born in Lebanon, Vernon H. Jones, 1885, who was at the Panama Pacific Expedition, where Frank Duveneck did get that award, and unfortunately died in San Francisco of a motorcycle accident. But we have a number of his fine pieces of sculpture, and you'll find many other fine paintings up there. Don't forget there's a discount at the gift shop, 20% on items which are non-consignment, and 10% on those which are consignment. Thank you so very much for being with us, and hope to see you next month.